So we spoke
time.
we spoke previously on Instagram about ideas and bouncing ideas for this topic, and we had the idea of like what turned us into the men we are essentially. And I thought it was a really good topic to get you on the show, because I had Jordan on a couple of weeks ago talking about nature and nurture, and like from a nature perspective, in terms of your upbringing, like you've had one hell of a crazy life. You've had 10 people's lives within I don't even know how old you are, but in the time that you've been on this earth. Yeah. So like taking this like a start, like just giving like an overview. Obviously you're from South Africa. What is it like growing up in South Africa? Because I've heard it's such like a dangerous place. Yeah, I know so many South Africans and they're all seem relatively numb to it. Like it's just standard practice. It doesn't bother them. Like, do you feel that was a tough area or not?
So you know what the interesting thing was and is to me in terms of growing up within South Africa, and you hit the nail on the head there. It's like we're so numb to it. We don't actually understand until you're exposed to what like normality is in terms of a safe environment. You have no idea what actual dangers you're living in a constant period of time. And it took me, surprisingly enough, moving over to Australia and immigrating or moving out, took me about 18 months to come down from that state. Like it was the strangest thing for me. I couldn't quite understand why. Like I was always a bit edgy, like living within my sympathetic drive quite a lot. So like for me, I would call that condition orange, is what we kind of like taught and within the environment that I was. It's like you live in condition orange, and condition orange is kind of a state of in between, like calm, cool, collected, but like ready to go. So it's like if shit pops off, it's gun out, ready to go, and you dropping whoever needs, like it needs to at that stage. That's condition orange, is always ready, not in red zone where you get tunnel vision and kind of blurred or blinded to the outside perspective, but condition orange is ready to go at any stage. And it took me 18 months to come out of that, at least. And that was a strange thing for me to try and process. It's funny, what the lady I was dating at the time, my ex-girlfriend, we would go out for dinner. And this was obviously just before pandemic type of vibe where you could actually go out for dinner. And we'd go out for dinner, and I always, and it's just a natural thing to me, it's like I sit at a table where I've got a solid wall behind me. There's no one behind me. I can see a good 180 degrees view. I can see where the front door is. I can see where the till is, and I can see where the closest exit is. That's how I pick a table. Because to me, that means no one can come up from behind me and cause any problems. I can see the till, because what generally happens in a robbery or some sort is they go straight to the till. I see where the entrance is because I know where they're coming from. I see where my closest exit is. I know how to get myself and my girlfriend out of the environment. That's how I used to live every day. And that was just natural.
Yeah.
I lived like that. That's what I did. I'd go out for coffee with my mom. I'd do the same thing. I'd sit at it, I'd walk around shopping centers and the same thing occurs. You walk to your car, and the immediate thing you do when you walk to your car, it's like you're not fucking around with anything in your hands. It's you have your car keys, you unlock your car, you're not playing on your phone, you're not digging in your bag if you're kind of alert from that perspective. You're looking in your environment as like, is there someone suspicious around my car? Isn't it in a place that's reasonably lit? It's like, what happens is you unlock your car, you get in the door, you close the door, and you hit the lock button. Boop. So that no one can come up and quickly open the door and carjack you, because that's what would happen. It's like, so that was my natural day and my natural living. So going back to your question, it's like, you're so involved in it and indoctrinated in it when you grow up that you don't realize how abnormal that actually is. And it sounds strange hearing it and actually speaking it. It's like, if anyone in South Africa listens to this, they'll be like, oh, you're over exaggerating. Like it is normal. And it's like, it's not. It's honestly not. Now coming to a very safe environment, Australia is very sheltered in that perspective.
Just the animals that could kill you.
Oh, it's just, fuck, man. There's some spiders. There's some spiders in this country that make me shit my pants. I'm not a fan of spiders. I'm not a fan of snakes. And I am definitely in a country where that would happen. I joke every time someone talks about snakes in Australia. And the only reason why I'm scared of snakes in Australia is because I can't go get the shotgun to blow its head off. Because that's what would happen in South Africa. I'd go get the 12 gauge and I'd take the thing's head off. I can't do that here. So I've got nothing.
But hard to do with a spider as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to lose half your house with the spiders in this country.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, going back to, I suppose that's going back to the whole question. Yeah, it's the environment definitely shapes you from that perspective. And learning how to deal with that amount of stress, it's just in you. You live in that constant sympathetic drive state, and it's, I don't know the stats at all, but I'd be super interested to have a look at like stress disease and like death from a higher stress society. I wouldn't be surprised if South Africans have it or are up there in terms of that.
Yeah. I always think it's amazing that you talk about being conditioned to it and not realizing how tough it was until you sort of moved out. It's like, it's amazing when you look at things like that, and like how people judge people as well. Like, I remember being like, the gun laws in America is obviously a very contentious argument generally, like whether they should be in place or shouldn't be in place. And I still am a very, like, you get in school shootings every other week. Countries that have gun laws don't. It's common sense, like in my mind. But I remember when my partner used to do an exchange in France, and she used to like teach children there for a week. And there was a girl coming from the States doing it, and she went, I never considered the gun laws a problem. And I was pro gun laws because everyone around me just had a gun. It was just the way it was. And then I go to France when there's no guns, and I'm like, oh, is this what safety feels like? And she just didn't know until she moved away, and then went back and went, yeah, these shouldn't be here. And it makes you think, like, rather than judging these people, it's like, yeah, you get used to what's around you. And it's, it's why I recommend everyone to travel, I think.
It's the perspective of those different environments that you'll take. It's like you start to appreciate or actually get a true representation of the environment that you're in when you travel. It's like I personally haven't done a lot of traveling. I've gone to the States when I was a lighty, a young kid. Lighty means young kid in Afrikaans, essentially. It's slang. And that's kind of it. In Australia, like, I've been here twice. Second time was obviously when I moved over. But that traveling perspective, or that exposure to a new environment, allows us to really look at the perspective. Like, I look at the perspective of being in this safe environment that I'm currently in versus being at home. It's like, currently right now, what's happening in South Africa is we have periods of what they call load shedding. So load shedding is essentially a timed period within the day where the power company, which is a government run institution, cannot provide enough power to the country. So it shuts off areas of the country for time periods within the day. So my mom sits at home, depending on the time of the day, she sits at home for 4 to 6 hours of her day without any power, without any electricity.
Wow.
So that's the perspective. It's like, I have a light on right now. It's like, my mom's sitting at home in South Africa right now. It's like, she can't boil the kettle. It sounds so weird, like saying this, and people are like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, the state-run company doesn't have the ability to power the country, doesn't have enough power. It can't produce enough power. So all we do is we flip the switch off on certain cities so that other cities can run, and then we'll just all take our times.
That's mental. So like when you said you've not really been widely traveled, you've been to the States, been to Australia. What is it that made you go and decide, all right, I'm moving away, I'm going to live in Australia, after going through probably, and we'll get into it later on, almost like the toughest stuff South Africa has to offer? I'm sure you're pretty used to it. Like, you weren't trying to get away from something.
No, I wasn't trying to get away at all. And it's supposedly a touchy subject, I suppose, because it was taken in a negative way with the people in the environment that I was in, unfortunately. But what essentially happened is I received permanent residency about 5 years ago via my father, who had moved over 10 years prior. And at the time, the laws were that you had 5 years to kind of be in country and extend it, and you needed to rack up a total of 2 years or something along those lines. and within about 18 months of me moving over here, they changed the laws that you needed to be in for a consistent 2 years to then extend it. So at the time, I was working at a strength and conditioning facility in South Africa. We made it known, and I was like, this, at some stage, I'm going to have to move to Australia to keep my permanent residency for a minimum of 18 months. That's what kind of needed to happen, and everything was okay. And I was studying via an institute that we've spoken about, just to try and get qualified as a personal trainer in Australia, so that if and when anything happened, I could kind of move over and start working legally from that perspective. And kind of the year went by, and I had the opportunity to surprise my dad for his 60th birthday. So I organized this whole secret thing, like no one knew. I flew in from South Africa, came in, surprised my dad. It was great. You know, like myself and my dad haven't necessarily had the best relationship in the past, but it's grown and it has become better. You know, 18-year-olds and under men are kind of dickheads to their father. It tends to be. There's always that animosity between, you know, father and son, I would suppose. And I surprised him. We had a good time. I did some continued education at the company that I was studying through, and they turned around and offered me a job. And I sat there and I was like, fuck, this is the opportunity. This is kind of what I need. It's 6 months earlier than what I was kind of expecting in terms of being able to move over, but I have a job. I've had an offer to move over. Like it's a start. And the company that I was working for, you know, basically turned around and said I'd planned this whole thing. So it was really difficult for me from that side. Like I unfortunately lost a lot of very close friends. And, you know, I went home, I packed up my entire house, sold everything off in about 10 days, moved, managed to do everything, and got on a plane and said goodbye to my one best mate who's now currently in Cyprus, my mom, and I left. That was it. I got on a plane and I fucked off.
I think, going into this sort of the topic of the podcast in terms of the characteristics, that how did you feel? Because I feel like some of the biggest moments in my life, the biggest breakthroughs I've had as an individual that's matured me, is the times where I've said yes to something important and then worked out how to do it later. Like my move to Hong Kong, I'd never been to Asia, and I was like, yeah, I'll go to Hong Kong, and I just got on the plane and went. You know, when I started at the company I spoke about before we went there. You know, like I lived in Wolverhampton, if you don't know, if you know the UK, but right in the middle of England, and this was London. So I had to do a 2.5 hour commute every single day for 6 days a week, which may not be much in South Africa, I don't know, but
no, that's a lengthy period of time.
Yeah, so that's a decent amount of time, right? And like those things, like they forge you as a person because they teach you work ethic. Like, how do you feel? Like, obviously you assembled that from previous employment stuff.
Yeah.
What did you learn from that process of just being able to like jump at an opportunity in a different country and just go?
If it's not fuck yes, it's no. Yeah. Like that's kind of how it was. This opportunity came up and I was just like, this is it. So it's like, I made a plan. Like, yeah, I joke, and I've joked to all my friends and kind of partners in the past. South Africans tend to make a plan no matter what it is. Like, we'll say yes and then work it out while we're going. It's like, you know, there's that saying of like, just go fast and break shit. It's like, that's kind of how we live to a certain extent. We'll fix it as we go along, but that's it. I jumped at the opportunity because, you know, unfortunately at the time, like I looked at the country and the state of South Africa, and it's, I want a family. I really do. I would love to have a family. I'd love to have a loving partner and a wife to kind of, you know, look after from that perspective and have kids. And I sat there really evaluating my life and kind of everything that I'd gone through, especially in the last 18 months before moving. And I sat there and I was like, this is not the environment that I want a child to grow up in. So it's like, if an opportunity were to come about, it's like, I can't say no. I have to jump at this opportunity. Like, I've got a visa that's expiring. Like, that's my ticket out of here. And it came about and I was like, well, I'm selling everything and going. Like, that's pretty much what occurred. And I think the work ethic and the jumping at opportunities like that, for me, honestly, came from my grandfather. My grandfather was a German kind of defect. Like, his father had driven in a Volvo from Germany just before the war with his mother, and like so really strange fucking story. Landed up somehow in South Africa, and my grandfather's work ethic was like second to none. And that's like, I learned a lot of that just from his, like how he portrays himself and how he carried himself through life. And to me, like he taught me that you make a plan, you get it done. Like if you commit to something as well, it's like you do anything and everything you can to honor that commitment. And that's, we kind of spoke about it, but like that's where integrity came from. It's like, that's, to me, as much as I've made mistakes in my life, and like I'll be the first one to say I have made mistakes, and I have probably acted in ways that wouldn't make me proud to look back on and say that I was thinking with integrity at that time. But I really try and strive every day to uphold and live within some form of integrity, because I think that's like the backbone of what we should be doing, especially as men. Like I feel like men these days do have it tough. We do, honestly. And without getting into the whole semantics of, like toxic masculinity and all those types of things, I truly believe that if more men were to really strive to live with a degree of integrity and really like think about every decision we kind of make to align with staying true to who we actually are, we'd have so much less shit going on. We wouldn't have toxic masculinity, because toxic masculinity is men who aren't living within their truth, are not living towards what an alpha man is. And what I mean by alpha man, I don't mean a man who disrespects women and, like is overpowering of females and, asserts themselves from that side, because that's not an alpha. That's not a man in my eyes. Like that's a pussy. It's like, you need a fucking hit across the face, and you need a genuine wake up call of like, you are tarnishing the name of men by acting in that manner. And that's, like, I don't speak up about it as much as that, but that's, I truly believe like that's a lot of what our problem is as men. And that goes into mental health perspectives. It goes into, men not being emotionally mature from that side. There's so many like carry-ons and snowball effects from this one toxic masculinity paintbrush that we've kind of all been painted with. And it's more men need to focus on living within their values and living true to their values. And, whether that might not necessarily be integrity, it may be whatever it is. I don't know. I just speak about integrity, to be honest, but like you stay true to your values and true to yourself, you're going to be a better man for society, be a better man for your partner, be a better man for, children, kids, anything that's associated, or your society or your community. It's like, you will better the community. So it's like, why the fuck are we not doing it?
I think when you look, I'm glad you like defined what your view of both an alpha male and toxic masculinity is. And I think when we look at integrity and how I would define it, it's not necessarily having every decision being the right thing, never making mistakes, not, living.
No, that's not it at all.
Yeah, I think there's a level of integrity is being like owning your mistakes. And I feel that the toxic masculinity thing that comes out, I wonder how many men are really comfortable owning up with the mistakes, because there's so much more pressure and so much more backlash than ever before, that if a man makes a wrong move, they're demonized and vilified on the behalf of it.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct in terms of that. Like integrity is a it's a blanket approach that kind of covers many aspects, I think. And like you just said, it's like owning up to your shit. One, as a male, female, child, whatever you kind of want to look at, owning up to your shit sucks. It sucks. We never want to admit that we're wrong or we've done something that isn't right. It's like no one actually wants to do that. But now more than ever, men need to own up for a mistake or something that they didn't do that was true to their values or true to who they actually are, who they are trying to live. And I think that in itself it's integrity, but it's now starting to act in accordance with who you genuinely are.
Yeah.
And if more people did that, both male and female, because, we understand that there is the masculinity energy of females and divine, all of that stuff I don't know enough about. I just know it gets thrown around before someone fucking cancels me for some shit.
Yeah.
like I have nothing wrong with women being masculine within their energy, but I also do feel that that can tip to the scale of also becoming abusive and becoming a scapegoat in terms of, your actions. It's like, you're not living within your masculine energy if you're a dick. It's like, if you're being a dick, you're being a dick. You're not standing up for your rights, etc. You're just being a cunt.
Yeah.
Like, that's it, to be 100% honest.
And this is the thing that's the sort of, for me, the big, I don't know if it necessarily got as far as you, but I'm sure it probably did, but the big Me Too movements that happened. And obviously this has obviously taken a big kick up recently with the horrendous things that have happened in the UK with Sarah Everard and things like this. And this is something my partner's very much got herself involved in, and rightly so. I think, women should have a right to be safe, and any man that is going against that or doing anything that makes a woman feel unsafe, as you said, deserves a clip around the ear.
100%. I mean, and as being as masculine as I would like to think that I try and live within, you touch a woman or you touch a child, that is a no-go to me. Like, I don't think I've really ever shared this, but it's like, I put my gun in a man's mouth who raped a woman. Do you know how close I was to blowing his fucking brains out? It's like, that's how much it enrages me. It's like, I made him taste the metal slide of my Glock. It's like, I made him chew on it because I was that enraged around what had occurred. It's like, to me, that's the no. Like, you rape, you abuse a woman, you want to see me get to the point of wanting to slash someone's throat, just tell me that you've done that. And like, abuse a woman or mistreat a female from that perspective, I see red and it's game over. It's like that. And it's been more and more apparent to me that I have an issue with that. And it's something that I've kind of like delved into, like with my psychologist, and kind of tried to look at the root cause around that. And it's like, my psychologist is like, I have this like image of what masculinity is, or what being a true man is. It's almost like a religion to a certain extent. And it's very old school with a new school touch. So it's very old school in the perspective of like, a man needs to be like there to support his wife, like look after his household, be caring, and like actually be what a man is. Like, we kind of get painted with that brush, like be hard, be physical from that perspective. But at the same time, understand that you respect females. So I'm not saying like, let's be cavemen and fucking grab the chick by her hair and like take off into the cave. Like, that's a no to me. But it's almost like using ancient philosophies of what a man is, mixed with the new school technique of, I would be more than happy if my partner earns more money than me. It honestly doesn't matter to me. But you know what does matter to me? It's like, I will do the man things within the household. And, people can shout at me and say this shouldn't be a gender thing, whatever it is. But at the same time, my wife asked me to clean the dishes, which I fucking hate doing. I will clean the dishes. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. But what I do see is it's wrong if you paint me with the brush of being, too masculine because I feel this way. And it's like, I want to look after my partner. I want to be the protector. I want, like, if shit pops off, my wife's getting behind me and I'm taking on the challenge. I'll take the rounds to the chest. I'll like go forth and try and look after my family. I see nothing wrong with that, but I see society like demonizing that. It's like, what is wrong with that?
You took the words out of my mouth, and that's the thing that I find with I would consider, in a way, I would consider myself a feminist in a way that I, similar to you, like this old school masculine approach with this new school way of respect. And as I said, I want to, have a world where women can have a position of power. There's no pay gap. There's, these opportunities. And I do feel that sometimes in a society, especially throughout the pandemic, where things have become more divided than ever, that this often the few ruin it for the rest. Like, what ruins me getting involved in really supporting women's rights is the women that say, it shouldn't be a masculine thing to be a provider. When did me looking out for my family become a bad thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the same thing with, like I say, with the Me Too movement, like the women's safety. Again, there's no argument that this is a very, very important cause. But when we got the thing, it was like, in the UK, we had this not all men thing. And I got a lot of backlash for saying, I don't agree with this. And it wasn't because I don't feel that more men shouldn't speak up for this sort of thing. But as soon as you should be almost saying to the men that aren't dickheads and rapists, like, hey, we need your support. Let's do this together. Let's make sure that everyone is safe. But it became a bit more of a men are the problem. I was like, no, specific men are the problem. And as soon as you demonize the group, you alienate the people that probably would want to help you.
Yeah, and that's exactly the case. It gets to the point of you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And that's exactly what happened. It if you didn't support the U2 movement, you were one of them who was, and I was like, I've never touched a woman in my life.
Yeah.
I would never raise my hand to my woman. It's like, my parents taught me differently. It's like, it is genuinely, like, I feel sick thinking about the thought of raising my hand to a woman. Like, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
So you've just painted me with that brush, but that's not that's not who I am. That's not what I believe. But just because I didn't say, woohoo, yes, go me too. It's like, why? I don't get it.
When did social media be the only way to voice your opinions? When did that become the representation of who you are as a person by what you post on your social media platform?
100%. And I sit here going, like, I know how I live. I know what my values are. If I saw a man, I say that in inverted commas because it's not a man. If I saw a man, raise his hand to a female on the side of the street, I would stop my car in traffic and there would be shit. It's like, so, but I didn't post it on social media and I didn't say that I'm part of the U2 movement. So does that mean that I don't support you? It's like, I don't see the correlation. It doesn't.
I would argue there's probably more support in you than the people that do this for a social media platform. Like, I remember going off on a little bit of a tangent. I remember we're going full on political here in this episode, but the full on Black Lives Matter movement. And I remember doing a post, like, when everyone posted just the black square, and I'm just sitting there going, how many of these people are just wanting to get in with the crowd? And I was like, I'm not posting a black square. And I said, I'm going to, for the next month, repost any posts that I see that are generally going to help people of color in America. Yeah. I'm actually going to repost them, because me just posting a black square does nothing. It raises awareness for nothing. Because most of the time at the start, before I read the news, I was like, why are people posting black squares?
Yeah.
I didn't even put two and two together.
I don't have an opinion on it because I don't know enough information. And you know what the sad thing is? Me saying that statement, do you know how many people will paint me with the brush of, oh, he's a racist?
Yeah.
It's like, but I genuinely don't know. And do you know what? More than happy to have an educated conversation with someone who feels like they can have a non-emotional conversation with me to discuss this matter. And I think that's the key thing. And I try to word that very correctly. A non-emotional conversation to discuss with me about what we are trying to support. I am more than happy to take it on board.
Agreed.
I'm happy to listen. I'm happy to have the discussion and say my say around what I've seen. Like, I come from a country, if you don't remember, that did segregation pretty fucking good. And what I mean by that is they did it effectively. I don't mean good in terms of what I support. Just to clarify that.
Just clarify that bit.
Yeah, just to clarify that before this really hits, like, this does not go anywhere. But like, I know the animosity around the segregation of whites and blacks. I learned about it in school. Yes, I was born, within the year that things kind of started to change. But trust me, not much has changed in the sense of the feeling between both blacks and whites within South Africa to a certain extent. And that shame on me for painting everyone with that brush, but there definitely are parts of communities, etc., that still believe in the same ways as we were back pre-1993 or 1994, and vice versa, which is even worse in my opinion. We see a correction which has actually become even worse, where I know and I've looked into the eyes of non-white individuals who at the chance would happily rip my throat out just because of the color of my skin.
Yeah.
And to me, like, I don't want to say one is right and one is bad, because I'm not touching that argument at all, because I genuinely don't believe that. But what I do believe is we are humans on either side. There is there is something that has occurred, you know, in a past situation, and I feel very bad for that has happened to them. But to now completely reverse that and paint me with the same brush as what you essentially were exposed to back then, I think that's, you know, it's two wrongs don't make a right type of scenario.
And I think it goes against your argument more. Like I sometimes think, like, am I misguided in this? Do you to make an impact, to make a change, do you have to go further than the middle to find the middle ground? Whereas I would make the argument that the more aggressive you are, the more you go, you know, the other way, the more it becomes an emotional debate. The more you're actually ruining your own argument and making certain people, whether it's, you know, people of color, whether it's gender equality, make certain people go, well, if you're gonna be like that, I ain't gonna get on board. And there's a middle ground.
Yeah, you're 100%, and that it ties back into what we were talking about with the Me Too movement. It ties back into, you know, male, female, masculinity, binary, non-binary, fucking all of this shit. It's
lost track of
that. Just because I don't voice my opinion around this doesn't mean that I'm the complete opposite to what you are. It's like, dude, do whatever you want to do. Be whatever you want to do. Don't fucking hurt anyone. Don't hurt any women. Don't hurt any children. And it's like, you are more than happy to do whatever you want to do. But don't shout at me if I don't understand what's going on, if I get your name wrong or your pronoun wrong. I mean, I've had the incident of, you know, accidentally calling a woman a dude because she looked like a dude. Okay, I'll be 100% honest. And I had the conversation with her, and luckily enough, we could have an educated conversation around it. I was like, do you understand that from what I know in the last 28 years of my life, I know what a male looks like. Okay. You look exactly like that. So do you know what pronoun I'm going to use for you? It's the one that I know for the last 28 years for that. And she said to me, she's like, I fully understand it. How are you to know what I am, what I identify as? And she said, next time I would appreciate it if you could refer to me as whatever she'd said at the time. And I was like, perfect. No problems. I will try my best to continue that. And amicable. We had a drink and continued on. And I was like, this is the conversation that needs to be had world round. It's like, not everyone knows. I genuinely don't know. I'm not even, to be honest, half the time, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm not even trying to say it in a negative way. I'm literally just, I'm being polite. Morning. And you land up getting blown up because I assumed something. I'm just like, oh, for fuck's sakes. I was just, you know what? I'm just not going to say hello to people.
I think it goes almost back to what you're saying about being in sort of like, was it orange alert or whatever that you were saying, or like being at sympathetic state, where like, I see it a lot in the fitness industry with the anti-diet movement coming out. Like, I'm in a business mentorship group, and they often now and again, they'll, you know, I saw this screenshot of this person, like all they did is follow somebody, and they got an inbox going, hey, are you trying to say I need to lose weight? He went, excuse me, all I did was follow you. Well, it was implied. I'm like, what? And like, it's like, where do you sort of go with this? I think people are sort of in this world now. I think it's born out of fear, and how segregated we are, where everything's getting censored, where people are now just living on edge. And it's harder to have those conversations because people's always on that sort of alert.
Everyone's sitting in condition orange around like, am I going to say something that's going to offend someone? Am I going to jail? Am I like, what's going on here? It's like, I knew we had a problem when Mr. Potato Head had to change his name. I was like, okay, guys, we've got the fucking problem. Like that's a genuine concern. It's like the potato has now had to have the Mr. taken away. And I was like, okay, fuck. Like, what's going on?
Have you seen the latest James Bond movie?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm not going to spoil it then, but I'll try and think of another example. But like, you look at the change in cinema in general, where male role models, whether they're good role models or not, we can make an argument in the James Bond's case whether he's a good role model for men.
Oh, he's a fucking legend. He's got such a good name.
So yeah, I'm the biggest Bond fan you ever meet. So I agree, he's a good role model in so many ways. However, I think now we see Hollywood sort of push away and marginalize male role models because they want equality. And I can't remember who I heard this phrase from, but I loved it. It's like, to be truly inclusive, you bring more chairs to the table. You do not kick the legs from the chairs that are already there. And I thought,
100%.
I wonder how many, like, what is like the elimination of male role models in the media? I wonder what it's going to do to male mental health even more in the next 10 years, where men now have no one to look up to.
Well, not just no one to look up to. It's you're now not going to know. You're not going to know who you are because we have no idea of what that should be. Because all I get told is if I am a man, I'm toxic, I'm abusive, I shouldn't be in this film, I shouldn't be allowed to be the main character, I shouldn't. And again, I'm not saying, and in that statement, I'm not saying that a female cannot be the main character. What I am saying is like, if we get told that males can't be the character, can't be the main person that's, in the limelight, it's like we kind of automatically assume that a male is now irrelevant. So are we going to get 20 years down the line, it's like men just don't exist because we don't know what a man actually is. What is a man in 20 years' time? I also think
it's more sexist to say, because repackaging franchises to have and by the way, this is not what they've done with Bond. Repackaging franchise to have female leads, like Ghostbusters, now all female. Ocean Eleven's now all female. And like, I'm not necessarily against the idea of having all female cast movies, but is it more sexist to go, you can't draw your own money, but don't worry, you can have our franchise, as opposed to creating brand new franchises that draw money? Charlie's Angels drew money from a female franchise. I'm sure that Tomb Raider, like, imagine if I said we're going to have a male Tomb Raider, male Lara Croft, Larry Croft. Like, it would be outrage. But the other way around, it seems to be the way the world seems to be going. Yeah.
And it's very scary for me to think about this like long term. Like, as I mentioned, it's like I would like kids, I would like a family. And I say this until about in the last couple of months, I've been genuinely thinking about it to the point of like, what would I do if I have a young boy? How do I allow them to be into society and not let them get completely annihilated? Like, the only thing I can think of, and we've kind of spoken about, it's like, as long as I live my truth and I stay within integrity and stay within my values, then I know that I will be hopefully doing a good enough job for my son. He's going to have a fucking hard time in society, though. I'll tell you now. And that's what's so scary. It's like, I don't know the answer. I don't know the thought process. I don't know the answer. I don't know what the future holds for future young men, because I genuinely don't see it occurring in the current state that we're in.
And I think people are so caught up in making a change for things that have happened in the past, and people have been pushed out, marginalized, not got an opportunity in the past. And while those things are great, people are missing the fact that, okay, yes, there is still maybe a bigger issue with having more inclusion of people of color and women in whatever, getting female sport up to the same level as men's sport. But when more people pay pay-per-views for female sport, MMA is getting pretty close, like, then there's going to be more opportunities. But I feel that, we're not seeing the trends of like, maybe it's not at disastrous levels yet for the effects on men, but this is only going to get worse over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I genuinely believe that. I see it from like the mental health perspective of men. And, like I've got a mate that I chat to about this every now and then. And so he's actually an ex-military commando. And we've had the conversation. I'm not going to mention his name just because there's medical details and stuff involved. But he took an explosion to the head, or they assumed something along those lines, and landed up damaging his hypothalamus. So he landed up actually having low testosterone. Now, it's become widely known within the military community, like obviously it started that making sure that the men's testosterone levels are checked on a regular basis has a huge impact on them as alphas within the military community in a positive manner. So what we started to see within the military is like men who had lower testosterone levels actually became worse off men. and started, becoming aggressive, losing their shit in terms of not acting in the way of like a man would act. So we sit here going like, it's not toxic masculinity. It's actually the lack of testosterone going down is causing more and more of these issues. So it's like, should we not be having the conversation around men? It's like, hey, any man over the age of 25, to be 100% honest, should be getting regular checks of your hormone panel. Should be having a look at like optimizing your testosterone levels from sleep, diet, exercise. If that has to be medical intervention, I'm all for it. At the age of 25, to be 100% honest, it's like we know over the last, like every 10 years, it's something like 100 nanometers or milliliters per in your blood unit that we're dropping from a normal testosterone level of men. So it's like something like 50 years ago, like we were sitting in the 1500s. Right now, a normal, like a good testosterone level for man is somewhere between 250 and 600, whatever it is, nanometers, nanomils, or whatever the fuck it is. It's like, that's not even 50% of what we were 50 years ago. It's like 50 years ago, yes, there was abuse, there was stuff like that, but we had men acting as men, women were safe, environments were better, communities were safer. So it's like, is no one going to put this correlation together? No, we're just going to say it's toxic masculinity and it's the repression of females.
And it's a weird thing when it comes to like certainly testosterone in men, because there's been the use of performance enhancing drugs has given such a demonization on people actually reaching out and getting medical help. Because I remember Dave Crossland, obviously is a big component of people getting the word out for safe gear use. Yeah. And like, I remember something he said on an old Ben Coomer podcast, and he was like, if I went into the office and I'd said, someone asked me how was my weekend, I go, oh yeah, it was good. Got smashed, did a few lines of cocaine, had a great night out. You may find that people might get a few upturned noses, but people are like, all right, good weekend then. Yeah. If you went on and said, how was your weekend? Yeah, I just started taking testosterone. People will be moving the fucking desks. Yeah. Like getting away from this guy. And it's got this demonized thing. I remember recently I got my bloods done and my testosterone reading came out low. Now, I'm not low. What I realized was my test was taken late in the day. So it's massively diarrheal.
The spike, yeah. So it's a picture of the current event that you're in. Yes,
I've taken my supplements in the morning. I wasn't long enough fasted. I took it again in the morning and a more comprehensive test, and I was like, okay. But when I was talking to my doctor, and he was like, if it comes back as low, we've got to look at options for HRT. And when I mentioned this to a couple of clients, they were like mortified and like, oh, isn't that going to be disastrous for your health? And they're quite the opposite. Like all-cause mortality improves massively when people have more testosterone.
Exactly. It's like we can decrease likelihood of mortality. We can decrease likelihood of mental disease. We can decrease likelihood of emotional problems from that perspective. Your immunity is increased. It's like, hey, why the fuck would I not be trying to optimize this?
Yeah.
It's like, but instead we just demonize it once again.
Yeah, demonize it and then take Tribulus and hope it sorts all the issues out with 3 hours sleep a night.
Yeah. Don't fix the actual symptoms behind it. Just treat I had a saying from when I was a paramedic in South Africa. So it's treat the patient, not the monitor. It's like, and that's a standard saying. It's like you treat what's in front of you. You don't treat the symptoms coming up on the screen. And that's what that statement initially means. It's like, look at the person in front of you. And I think if more personal trainers, more, clinicians focused on the human being in front of you versus, the symptoms, the monitor from that perspective, we can actually start to understand like why the monitor is doing this because of the person in front of you. Yes. It's like your testosterone levels are low. How many hours of sleep do you get a night? 3. Maybe that's why. Like that's the correlation that we start to see from that. It's like, I don't know. It's just, it's a funny world that we fucking live in. I don't know what's going on anymore. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 to 30 years. It scares the shit out of me.
I agree. And I think going into like sort of the testosterone thing, I think, I'm in two minds now about where I think doctors' role in this is when it comes to things like testosterone, because in a lot of arguments was like, they don't promote lifestyle intervention, prove sleep, prove health, prove nutrition. They just give a pill. and they're known to prescribe things. And for a while, I was very much anti this. And then I did a podcast with a guy called Sean Croxton, and he made me took the other side of it. He went, yeah, but how many people truly change their life when you tell them to sort the sleep out? If I can take away your symptoms by giving you this pill, and that's almost a guarantee, and that's going to help your health more than not taking the pill and carrying on your actions anyway. What do you do? And then you start to piece it together, because you only look at the statistics of people on, terminal cancer still not taking their medication. Then how are you going to get somebody who has, like, I don't know, a slightly low testosterone reading, but not really feeling that much symptoms, rather than maybe a bit tired and not getting morning wood, to go, oh, I need to have my sleep.
It's what's the quickest and easiest option to fix the solution? We live in a society of instant gratification. So it's like, it's literally shit. It's pissing up wind. I fully agree with that statement in terms of doctors. Like, I'm the first one to kind of steer away from medical intervention being that from pills, because I don't necessarily think that the patient's best interest is at heart a lot of the time. But in saying that, I do also see the flip side of that is how many times these doctors see the general population walk in, and they've let their body go to the point that actually they're not willing to put in the effort to alleviate the symptoms that are there. So you know what the doctor has to do? He needs to give the intervention to bring them back out of the slump that they've put themselves in, to hopefully then maybe increase livelihood with other interventions on top of that. I see both sides of the story. I don't think either are right, and I don't think either are wrong. I think they're kind of just doing the best with what they have in front of them.
100%.
That's my look at it.
I love the phrase you mentioned earlier on about treat the patient, not the monitor. And I think that brings us on nicely. Like, one of the things, there's a couple of things that I want to discuss on here about that will help us become, help you become the man you are. And before we go on to your injury history and move it on to training and the stuff that you do now, obviously there's this big time in your life where you're a paramedic in South Africa. Tell me a little bit about sort of like that experience. What were some of the crazy stories that you're allowed to tell that, and, how did that experience sort of change you?
So it kind of all starts in my final year of high school. So that's like grade 12 in South Africa. And I was geared up to, like, I was a decent field hockey player. I played at a relatively high level. I played like Premier League men's at like 18, and I was doing relatively well. And in a school game, I took a knee to the back of the head. And long story short, I'd taken multiple knocks to the head within my lifespan up to about the age of 18.
Just rugby, same thing. No,
just from being a boy and just being unlucky from what had happened. And I landed up with a severe trauma to the brain, or brain trauma from that perspective. And it took me a very long period of time to get out of that, to the point where I nearly didn't finish school. I had short-term memory loss. 51st dates was literally my life. So it's like, that she wakes up every morning, she reads the book. Like, I had a book next to my bed because my short-term memory was fucked. I didn't know what was going on. Long story short, doctors turned around and said, you can't play contact sports again. And I was like, fuck this. I'm making an emotional decision. I'm never going to play sport. I'm not going to be a sports scientist, because at that stage, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into exercise science, and that was my lifelong dream, whatever. And for some reason, I just remembered this paramedic who helped me on the side of the field. And I was like, I want to do emergency medicine. Like, my parents were like, this is not, they supported me, but at the same time, it wasn't the best likelihood. It's not a very respected profession in South Africa. It's not a very good profession in terms of longevity. Mental health is very bad within the profession. Lots of drug use. Pay is extremely low. You're not necessarily looked after as a paramedic. It's difficult. Anyways, started off going through like a short course, university, became a licensed, but what they call the basic life support. So that's like your low level. You can drive your ambulances, treat your patients. You've got a decent amount of drugs. And you can kind of make a difference if that were the case. And I started working, and I worked with my partner that I became best friends with, who's now in Cyprus. And like my first shift, I think I declared 4 people. So it's like my first shift at the age of 18, I declared 4 people dead. It's like that was my introduction to being a paramedic. So at the age of 18, I'll tell this story. We were at a racetrack. We had been requested for an event at a racetrack. So you have to have medics at certain events. We were at a racetrack and we're sitting at the start of the racetrack of motorbikes, superbikes. And for some reason, my partner turned the ignition on the ambulance. And I like looked at him and I was like, Chris, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. He's just like, we were causing shit and talking cock and just being, 18-year-old. He's 20. So 20-year-old and an 18-year-old in an ambulance, just causing shit. He turned the ignition on and he's like, oh, and I was like, fuck, I got a weird feeling. This is strange. And the bikes were doing a running start. So running start obviously means that they're not all lined up. They kind of do a lap of the track. And as the flag gets dropped, everyone kind of goes and it starts while you're moving, running, essentially. And what had happened is guy let loose and he kind of put too hard down on the throttle, whipped up and flipped the whole bike. And as he came back down, he hit the ground, base of skull fracture. So the back of his head hit the tarmac. And his 16-year-old son who was racing with him, his father and son is what we found out, into the back of him and killed his dad. I was first on scene. So we literally had just like within 15 seconds, Chris had started moving forward. We had parked just in front of this full crash. There was 10 bikes down. This bike, I ran to the first one. I jumped out the back. And I remember kneeling over the patient. And I remember looking at his helmet and looking at his visor, and it was red. It was just red. So essentially what had happened is a base of skull fracture is he severs the spinal cord in the back of his head. And it's pretty much instant death at that point. Gushing out the nose. So you have cerebral spinal fluid that comes out the nose, out the ears. I scooped him. So there was a nurse on board with me. She was kind of a bit panicky from that perspective. We scooped them up in a scoop, put them in the back of the ambulance and just started riding to the clinic. I got on top of the bed, felt for a pulse, no pulse. I was like, fucking started pumping chest, managed to get the helmet off to kind of get oxygen in. Couldn't get a proper seal over the guy's face because what had happened is with the amount of blood coming off, the rubber on the silicone of what we call the BVM or the bag valve machine or device, whatever it is, to provide oxygen to the patient. Couldn't create a proper seal. And what was happening is as she was squeezing the air through the bag to give him oxygen, she was just creating a airflow to push blood up and out. And I just was covered. I was literally head to toe covered in this man's blood, pumping chest as hard as I can, just trying anything and everything. So we quickly got him went through full resus, drug veins, adrenaline, kind of the whole works. And unfortunately, that was that. And at the age of 18, my first death, my first resus, essentially, I had to walk up to a 16-year-old and tell him that he hit his dad and killed him. And that was my introduction to being a paramedic. To further that, within that day, we had 3 more deaths. So what essentially happens eventually at that stage is after the next 3 that kind of we closed the whole track, and it's known within kind of the racing community, it's a cursed track for the day, and there's no more racing. We had 3 deaths, 2 we had to fly out. So it's like I resussed the fuck out of everyone that day. You ever want a tricep pump? You ever want like a proper tricep pump? You perform CPR, and I was shattered. I remember I've got a photo somewhere. I'll send it to you after this. I've got a photo of I went through 3 uniforms. That's how much blood was all over me. To the point of like I was walking around this racetrack in my pants and a high vis safety vest. That's it, because I had no more clothes to wear because there was so much blood, so much that had gone on. It's like that was my first shift as a paramedic. Like
I've heard you mention before that, like going through that like career, that you sort of lost empathy. It literally get a little bit like being numb to South Africa's dangers, being numb to horrendous,
and that's literally what you do. I've chatted to a couple of paramedics over here in Australia, which is quite cool to see the interactions from that side. And my mom used to say, it's like, put your bubble on. So it's like, or in some of the paramedic communities, it's like, put your cape on. It's like your cape is your protective shield. it numbs you out from anything and everything that we see. It's like you don't have the ability or you don't have the opportunity to be emotional on a scene because emotion kills the patient. So you have to learn very, very quickly that when you arrive to a scene and you've got some dude bleeding out in front of you, it's like you don't give a fuck about feelings. It's like you give a fuck about what's going on with that patient. And unfortunately, what we see within the industry, that's my camera. I knew that was going to happen. Give me 1 second. So essentially what we see within the industry is we see an inability for paramedics to go from that one state of, or the state of being protected by their bubble or their cape, to transitioning and leaving that at work. And it because we kind of are so stuck within our ways around that, it affects your daily life. It affects anything, everything. I think this is maybe the story that I've told before. I was sitting at one of my ex-girlfriends. We were having a braai. So a braai is like
I know
fire. It's a barbecue.
yeah.
Fucking, it's a braai.
We know. I'm almost surprised that you've never lived in Hong Kong, because literally 90% of South Africans tend to move to Hong Kong.
Yeah. It is one of the big ones.
My fiance starts using the word braai now on a regular basis because she's been to so many of them.
Okay, she can stay. She's allowed to stay. Good. So we were sitting around a braai, and there'd been a family death. If I remember, it was her uncle or something along those lines, and everyone was sad and kind of mourning the death. And I remember I'd just come off shift, and I remember the shift like quite vividly. No, what's the right word? Quite whatever. It was in my mind, and I remember sitting there, and everyone was sad, and I was sitting there. And I remember her, or my ex-girlfriend, looking at me and having this puzzled face on. And I literally looked at her and I was like, it's death. It happens. It's like, why are you guys so sad? Like, what's wrong with you? And I remember saying that, and I said that, and I remember it coming out of my mouth and like looking at everyone's faces like the shock. And I literally was like, I have a problem. Like this is not right. Like this is, like the person that I loved at the time, it's like Samantha, she'll probably never, I fucking broke her heart. I was such a dick. If she ever watches this will be hilarious. She'll laugh at me for that. Like I should have been consoling her. I should have had some form of empathy for her and her family, except I sat there and I was like, it's death, get over it. Because that's what I was exposed to. It's like we were exposed to people in situations who, like, it's the worst situation you would ever want to be in. It's like, it was normal. It's like, you get on with it, you treat the patient, you put them in the back of the ambulance, you take them to the hospital. It's like, you don't have time to feel. You know what you do? Like how you decompress from that? We would all, like, we drop off the patient, we'd meet at the petrol station or the garage, and we'd talk shit, or like someone would get like a prank put on them. Like we were known for pranks. It's like we would joke around. We would, like, drugs is a big one in the industry. That's very big. I personally, that's not kind of my vice. Porn is a big one in the industry. Like it numbs you out from that side. It's like that some of the paramedic groups that I used to be on, you would be horrified to see the shit that comes through. And the funny thing is, now looking at it from like an outside, it's like, that's how we decompressed. That's how we coped with what was going on. It's like some of the shit that I've been sent, and like I've sent to people as well. Like I literally sit there, I'm like, I'm horrified. I'm mortified at what I was using as a means to cope with. But that's what you did. Yeah. So, that was part of some of the stories that I went through. It's like we had a really bad month. It's kind of like the curse of being a paramedic. It's like we had something like 6 or 7 basic skull fractures within a month. It's like and that to me it didn't fuck me up. And this is how I learned to completely turn off my emotions so quickly as a paramedic. It's like I had that first death. I had 3 or 4 other deaths or what it was on the racetrack in that same day, all motorbike accidents, all, similar mechanisms. It's like, and the next month was just the same thing. So it's like every time I arrived at the patient, I was like, this is the same as my first death, turn off. It's like, and I got really, really good at not feeling emotion. It's like it came in all my relationships. So like my mom would be going through issues or shit. I'd be like, fuck, I don't really care. Like, it's not an issue. It's like, I had a dude die on me. It's like, I don't really care if you can't, start your car. It's like, fuck. So it became a really negative emotional state that it puts you in. And I think that was kind of how I then started like searching for my way out to a certain extent. It's like I then studied exercise science on the side while I was kind of still working, started taking personal training clients, and like moved more into trying to help people, I suppose. Like I was helping people from a medical perspective, but it almost didn't feel like I was helping in a right way. So I started like training people, helping people, got involved in a strength and conditioning gym, still worked as a paramedic on the side. And then like my love for guns and shooting and all of those types of things kind of transitioned into my work as a paramedic. And we started getting involved in what we would call like tactical emergency medical services. So it's like we became the paramedics on, different teams, who would go into what we call a hot situation. So generally what happens is when there's a shooting, a stabbing, an assault, something along those lines, the scene is considered hot until the police are there or it's confirmed that it is now like a cold scene and it's not hot anymore. Like the perpetrator is not there. There's no more gunfire, those types of things. Generally, that's the case worldwide. South Africa is very different because there's fucking guns everywhere. So what we naturally did as paramedics, like we went into hot scenes all the time. Like I know of multiple paramedics who would go into the townships, like Alexander would be one of them, and be hijacked within the township, going to a fake call. So you'd arrive at a call and someone would direct you and you'd pull up to the house and you'd have guns pointed at you, get out the car. And you'd have all your possessions stolen from you. It's like, and you were there to try and help people. But what they had done is they'd put in a fake call to get you there to steal everything from the ambulance. So it's like, that became the way of paramedicine. So then what eventually started coming out, and as the times changed, it's like we had tactical emergency medical services. So it would be someone armed would go into a medical situation and that could handle the situation, whether it was an assault or that needed gunfire or support from that perspective, but still could provide medical services to that was treated. It's like, and that just like ignited me. I was like, I get to get shot at, I get to treat people, I get to shoot at people. Like, this is fucking epic. Like, let's get involved in that. And like, that's where me and my best mate kind of like took ourselves. We got involved in that. We got involved in anti-rhino poaching units at the stage. It's like, it just, man, it was fun. Like, I miss it. Thinking about it now, like, I miss all of that stuff. Like, I'm just addicted to the adrenaline from that perspective.
Like, it's so interesting to hear you talk about missing an environment where, I remember you talking about on Jordan's podcast about actually getting shot when you're doing the anti-rhino poacher units. And yet you still miss that. Like, like it's one thing I was going to ask you earlier about seeing sort of some of this stuff. Like, because you're allowed to shut off your emotions, do you remember like vividly, like some of the, like quite many of these scenes? Like I remember when I saw Hit and Run, and I remember that face better than most people that I've been friends with for years. And like, is that still the case with everything? Is that all in the back of your head, or is it you see so many that you sort of, other than the first one, it sort of blends into one?
It kind of it has degrees of severity. So it's like, I remember the more severe ones, and I think as your time as a paramedic kind of goes on within the livelihood of your career, it's like the smaller stuff becomes small. But in saying that, like it also depends on the person. Like I know a lot of paramedics who are fathers who will tell you about every scene they've gone to that involves some kind of kid, because that's close to that's their environment, that's their heart. Like their heartstrings got really pulled on. And as paramedics, it's just one of those things. It's like, if we know a child is involved, like we go that much harder, like we go that much faster. We go, like we push the limits on that. It's like, because we know, like we know ourselves in terms of families. It's like, that's what we would want for any and every one of us, to hopefully hope that someone is doing that for our child. It's just, it was like an unwritten rule. It's like, if a kid is injured, it's like, you break all the rules. It's like, we would drive extremely fast. Like there's laws in South Africa around it, but I don't think anyone actually abides by the law as a paramedic. It's like, I got zapped by a speed camera once responding to a call doing like 185 in like 100 zone. And I think the law is like 20% above speed limit is what you're allowed to do. I was like, that's significantly higher than 20%. But it's like, it was an unwritten rule. It's like you just get there as fast as you can. It's like drownings, those types of things that would always pull on our heartstrings. And like I remember a couple drownings from that perspective. I remember, I remember obviously the first couple ones from that side. I remember the little kiddies that I watched, 2 little kiddies burned to death in a car. It's like I remember those kids. Trust me, I fucking remember those kids. I remember the screams. I remember all that type of stuff. So it just, you've got to be you are very hypersensitive to that, even when you are emotionally shut off. And I think that's why we see the industry lifespan to be very short. It's like generally in South Africa, I think the paramedic lifespan, depending on where you work, but is generally like 5-ish years.
Did seeing all the stuff that you must have seen. I mean, looking back on it, I suppose at the time, as I said, it left you very numb and lacking empathy. But looking back on this now with a few years past, like, has it changed your outlook on mortality? Has it changed your daily life in general, knowing how things can be stopped in an instant? Like, how has it affected you after the fact?
It definitely made me more like appreciative of the people around me. And I think that's kind of where it came back into, like, I made sure that my circle had my back for everything and anything. It's like that as a man within society, I made sure that the people around me, portrayed the same values. We lived up to the same type of code, the same ethics. Like my friendship circle, like we all trained together. Like we landed up all working together. Like everyone's integrity was the same. It's like we were a pack. That was us. It's like everything was the same because we could understand it and we could kind of make society better around that. And like they made us all better men. Like all the men that I was surrounded by were, like good family men. Like we tried as hard as we could. Like the friendship circle that I had at that stage, like no one beat their wife. No one had ever cheated on like their wives or girlfriends or anything like that. Like, we just had this, it's just who I attracted.
Yeah.
And I think that came from, it does come from the industry to a certain extent, but the industry is also very, like, I was a fucking dog as a paramedic. Like my favorite catch line used to be, do you want to see the roof of my ambulance? That was what I used to say to women. And it worked every single time. Every single time. It's like, I was just known for that. Myself and my partner did things that like, it's disgusting to think about, like what I did. And that's why, like I mentioned in the very beginning of the podcast, like I've done things that I'm not proud of. 100%, I'll be the first person to admit to that. It's like, but at the time, like looking at it now, it's like, that's how we coped. It's like, we did fucking stupid things because of that. It's kind of like how we were. So, like, and I found that the friendship circle that I started hanging out with and started like associating with from training, and this is where I think training is so good for men and like instilling that principle of integrity in men and values. It's like that kind of took me away from the path that I was kind of going down, and it allowed me to like look at my values, value myself, look after myself from like a health perspective. And that then shaped like the people I had in my life, like the women that I attracted. Like I saw futures with them. It's like, okay, this is what a man should be. Yeah. I went from being an 18-year-old who didn't know what the fuck he was doing with life. Like I wasn't sleeping around with girls or anything like that, but like I was hooking up with girls. Like I was using the uniform, but just attracted older women left, right, and center. It's the greatest fucking tool in the world. But like myself and my partner did like stupid things from that perspective. And I saw how it changed and how I started to grow and develop as a man. And like I came to this fork in the road of like, you can go down this path as a paramedic and go down and it is what it is, or you can better yourself in this environment, training, looking after your body, valuing the gift that you had. So it's like I was relatively strong. Like I got there, I put in the hard work. Like my grandfather taught me about all these values. So it's like I started really focusing on that. And that's where I drove myself towards that man or that ideal of a man that I didn't know what it was, but I just had this drive to go there. It's like I'm very thankful for the people that I had around me because they gave me a very good role model from that perspective. And I just kind of like focused on that and I really drove home with that. And unfortunately, like I just was dealt a really shitty card in terms of injuries and, those types of things. Like I went through 2 labrum repairs that failed, which then kind of resulted in AV necrosis of head of femur. I then had a full hip replacement at the age of 21. So it's like I came from competing at Commonwealth Champs in 2015 to a year later having a full hip replacement, not essentially leaving my competitive career behind. Didn't really know where I was as a man in that stage. Like I was in so much pain from the second labrum repair. Like I remember my ex-girlfriend at the time, Nicole Hall, just, like I did things to her that no woman kind of deserves from an emotional perspective. Like nothing in terms of like, abuse or anything like that. But I was in so much pain and going through such a hard time around the situation. It's like, I was depressed. I couldn't, like, lying in bed was painful for me. Like I couldn't do anything. Like we couldn't be intimate. We couldn't, like, nothing could occur. And I just pushed her away from that perspective. I remember the one day, and that's why I have him, my golden retriever. Like he saved my life. And I literally mean this. I was lying in bed. I don't think I've ever told the story. I was lying in bed and like I was going through so much pain, and I had been in constant pain for like 2 weeks consistently, like a good 8 out of 10 pain. Like I couldn't move, etc. I was like, I'm fucking done. I can't handle this shit anymore. It's like, put a gun to my head. And I was like, this is it. I'm done. I'm over this. This is the only way that I can get over this pain. And he jumped up on my bed. And I remember, like, I didn't call him. I didn't do anything. Like he jumped up on my bed. And I looked at him, and he had this fucking toy in his mouth. He always carries a toy around. And I looked at him, and the thought that went through my head was, if I do this, no one's going to know that my dog is locked inside. They'll know. I don't know what will happen to him. And I put the gun down. Like, I just lay with him. And that was it. That was the only time, like, I thought about it, and I was like, okay, fuck, this is a problem. And I went down the venture of then finding out what was actually going wrong, and landed up with the full hip replacement and kind of going through that whole recovery. And unfortunately, 2 years post that, having to have a revision done because my body rejected the implant, and like going through the whole emotional trauma again with all this shit, and like a whole bunch of other injuries around that. And it just, life kept throwing curveballs at me to just make me a better man, better human, better man. Like, understand that life is fucking tough, but we can't, like, you have the ability to be better. It's like you have the opportunity to do better things. So it's like, go for it. No matter what is in your way. It's like, like my identity was lifting. I wanted to be strong. Like, it made me a good man. It made me feel powerful. Like I felt like I could protect my girlfriend, like the girl Nicole that I was dating. It's like, I struggled so much with being injured and going through what I was going through, because in my head, if something were to happen, I couldn't protect her. Like, that's what I thought, because to me, that's how I associated like what being a man had been with. And every single time I went through these challenges, I kept thinking about, like, okay, as a man, how can I use this disadvantage that I'm essentially having? Like, it's a disability. It's a disadvantage. If, not to shit on people with real disabilities, but it is like, I live in pain every day of my life. Like, I can't walk up a hill without being in a significant amount of pain. Like, it fucks with my head. But every single day, like, I'm like, okay, how is this making me a better man? What is this challenge that is ahead of me? How is it going to benefit my wife in 5 years' time, my children in 10 years' time? What am I going to be able to use from this situation? And I'm not saying that everyone needs to go and get injured for this to happen, but I think strength training and having goals around resistance training, like, it allows you to kind of create the same effect. It's like, training makes you better at life. It makes you a better man. It makes you a better business person. It makes you better in your job. It's like, go and fucking train.
Yeah.
It's like, do it. Like, do it. Like, I wish I could still continue. Like, I still train, nowhere near like what I am, wish I could kind of be able to do. But without going through training, it's like, I wouldn't be the man that sits here now. Like, I've gone through fucking hell. But you know what? Like, I don't blame the world for it. I haven't attached an identity to it. I've become a better man for it. Like, I've gone through struggles. Like, I've gone through emotional problems, like, especially this year in itself. Like, I've gone through mental problems that I didn't know that I had. and it's starting to develop. Like, it came up from the side of like understanding that I had trauma from when I was a paramedic, understanding I had trauma from growing up as a kid, understanding that I had trauma from like living in an environment where like people were getting fucking hijacked next to you in the car. It's like, that shit's not normal, but it's like, that's come with me with my life. I'm 28 years old. It's like, I can't sit around and let those experiences shape me for a negative. I've taken the ownership as the man that I sit here today, and I've gone, those experiences that I've gone through, those life lessons that I've gone through, I will use every single one of those to make myself a better man for society, for my future partner, for my parents, for my fucking dog. It's like, I'm here to be the best man that I can be, and I appreciate every negative that has occurred to me to allow me to see the positive aspect of it.
You hit the nail on the head with training. And I had this conversation with a client today, in that training is a really unique animal, because you can't fake it. You could be the best at your job, but someone plays the game better and gets a promotion. You could really fancy a girl and do everything you can to charm them, and they still don't fancy you. But with training, you generally get out what you put in. And I've seen it so many times, the people who get the best results, it's not about the result. It's not about the six pack or the PB bench press. It teaches you things like work ethic, we spoke about before. It teaches you diary management, structure. It teaches you how to grind when things are tough. Because like, you've probably got a little bit of that from your early age of like having tough things happen to you and having these setbacks. But a lot of people going into training have never, ever experienced, maybe more so in an instant gratification world, never experienced hardship. And this is the thing that teaches them it. And this is the thing that makes them better men.
I 100% agree with that. It's like, the pursuit of strength is not like this. It's not 15 seconds. It takes forever. It's like, you plateau, you struggle. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. It's like, you have to work harder every single time. You want to be a better man? It's like, fucking do it. You have to work. It's like, so if you've, I say this very carefully. It's like, if you've lived a sheltered life, strength training is your best friend. It's like, because it's going to teach you that fucking life is actually really fucking difficult in a positive way. It's going to make you a better man. It's going to make you a better wife. It's going to make you a better female. Like, I don't want to just, segregate this conversation from what we kind of started with. It's like, it makes you a better human at the end of the day. So it's like, go and do it.
Yeah. And like, going into like, there's obviously the story you told with your hip injury, like, obviously to have that, very tough moment, and, the dog essentially saving your life. There obviously was a point where, I'm not saying you were like being a victim to your surroundings, but there's a point where there was an element of, I can't get through this.
Yeah.
What was it that changed your outlook? Because it seemed almost like was it that moment? Because it seems almost like, okay, now I'm going to make sure I find out what's going on. Where did the change in like mindset around your injuries occur?
It was, that moment was the catalyst to understand that I have a problem from the physical and mental perspective. It was like, I was struggling with it from like mentally. And I sat there, and I kind of remember my grandfather saying, it's like, we make a plan. So I was like, this is not going to defeat me. It's like, I just stopped myself from blowing my fucking brains out. It's like, I've been given the opportunity. It's like, now we go and we make a plan. So, you know what we did? We made a plan. We figured out what was going on to a certain extent. Like, I traveled far to try and figure out what was going on. I went to doctors in different provinces. I had special MRIs. I landed up flying to Australia. So eventually having a physician, a sports physician, look at me here and going like, you need a full hip replacement. It's like, this is bad. You need a full hip replacement. Like, you're not getting, they wanted at a stage to cut my psoas and do a whole bunch of shit there. They thought it was a psoas. And the surgeon turned to the sports physician, looked at me and said, if they cut your psoas, you have lost your whole life. It's like, it's not your psoas. Your hip is done. And I was like, okay. And like, that took 3-4 months to kind of make this whole approach happen. But it was that moment that I turned around and I was like, I'm done being the victim within this situation. I'm now going to take this into my own hands and make a plan. My grandfather's kind of, the values and everything that he instilled in me from growing up, like that was kind of it was like a sudden change in what occurred, but it had something that I'd been brought up with all my life. Like my parents were the same thing. My dad made a plan if we needed money for things. My mom did the same thing. It's like I testament to them. Like they did nothing wrong in this whole situation. It's like my parents tried everything to try and make sure that I was supported. They did. I take my hat off to them. Like I aged my mom fucking years from like the head injury and then also like this. It's like I've got nothing. I can't say a negative against my parents and my grandfather, etc. and all of these. I was dealt a fucking shit card. And that moment changed my life forever, because then I kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen, I posted it a few times. Like I have a little saying on my board. It's like, I never want anyone to go through what I went through. And what I mean by that is like, as much as I had people around me, it's like I was alone through that whole fucking process, because no one knew what was going on. No one understood what was going on. It's like I went through that by myself.
As opposed to people who were around you, that even no matter how much support they would give you, no one really understands the pain you're in. And especially when pain science is so unique and so complicated, only you can understand that.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And that's why, like now, when I work with people who are in pain, it's like when I say I understand, trust me, I fucking understand. It's like, and that's the unique thing. Like I use that as my, like, that's my impact right now. It's like, I can understand when you say to me, it's like, dude, I can't get out of bed. Like it's a 10 out of 10 pain. I can say to you, I understand. Now, I don't mean that I know your exact 10 out of 10 pain, because that's impossible. We understand with pain science, like your 8 out of 10 pain could be my 10 out of 10 pain, for example. But I understand what is going on because I've been through that experience. I pulled myself out of that experience. I pulled myself out of a situation where I was ready to just end it because I just couldn't handle it anymore. It's like, so now I make sure that any and every person who's going through that, who comes to me for help, it's like, you know what I do? I'm there as their best friend. I'm hounding the fuck out of them. It's like, hey man, how you doing? Every day. Because do you know what I wanted when I was going through my shit? I just wanted one person to be like, how you doing? And wait for me to say, yeah, I'm okay. And then being like, stop being full of shit. Like, what's going on? Because, you know, as men, we do this. Like we don't talk about what's going on. And I think that's part of what I'm good at now. It's like, I can get across to other men. It's like, hey, you don't have to be superhuman and like go through this alone. It's like, I put a gun to my head and try to fucking, like, I was that close to taking my life. It's like, that's the severity of this. I understand that. It's like, so tell me when you are feeling shit so we can have a conversation.
I think that's there's so many things that we keep touching on tangents that are brilliant for the topic we talk about. And in terms of like the things that are important to being a man is it so much resonates to me talking about like how men shouldn't have to be proud. And I think sometimes the ability of being vulnerable is so much harder than being quote unquote strong. And like I think that's something where, as I said, we're conditioned, we're taught as men, and if there's one thing that probably does need to change about the outlook of the old school outlook of men is that you've got to be hard, you can't share your problems, because I feel that a lot of men do feel that way. And like obviously I can't compare anything to your story. I can't throw a candle on it, but it resonated with me in the sense of I knew when I was going through, a pretty toxic work environment, which is nothing like your pain. But I remember feeling that sort of same thing of like, I'll put a brave face on this because my problems aren't anyone else's problems, and I have to. But I remember times going into work thinking, I just want one person just to say, hey man, do you want to grab a coffee? Is everything okay?
Yeah.
And not consider when I speak up about it, considering, hey, stop moaning. I don't think there's enough appreciation, whether it's the small things in life that get us down or things like this, which is obviously it's incomprehensible to most.
You're 100% right. I think it's because we do get a lot of the environment where it gets taken too far, where it becomes whining.
Yeah.
It's like it plays the victim role. Like you have to be very careful when you look at this and understand. And I think this is the key thing, now that you've gone through that experience, you'll also be able to help other people around that, because you will understand if it's someone playing a victim role or if it's someone looking for help, because they're two very similar things, but they're two very different options, or two very different scenarios from that perspective. It's like, I cannot stand when people are victims. I cannot stand it. I'll tell you to fuck off. But I fully understand when you are not a victim and you need help. It's like, I've got very good at reading that and having that ability, because like, I understand when you need help. It's like, if you sit there, you whine about your problem and you're not willing to do anything about it, it's like, okay, you're whining, you're being a fucking victim. It's like, you tell me about your problem, it's like you genuinely don't know what to do, and you're genuine about it. Like, we as humans these days can smell bullshit from a mile away. Like, I can tell if someone's talking shit to me straight away, because I smell it. You can see it's not genuine. It's not who they are. So it's like, you see someone who is genuinely trying to get out of a rut. It's like, I'm there for you. I've got your back, 100%. I will lift you up physically myself if I have to. It's like, we will get through this together, because that's all I wanted when I was going through my shit. Yeah. I just wanted one person to help me. Like, I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of know, like, it doesn't have to be, I have to have a full hip replacement and I can't get out of bed. Because one person's stress, it's similar to pain science. What a stress that could cripple me, you might go, sorry, what the fuck are you stressing about? And vice versa. And I think it's a demeanor thing of, like, the smallest things can knock people down, but as you say, there is a difference from people that don't want to do anything, and then there's the people that, like, they don't feel they've got the support they need. And sometimes it's often such an easy fix.
Yeah,
it's just making people feel they have a voice, making people feel that they're important. And like, there's a post I'm gonna put up eventually when I do my quote posts. It's like, talking about leadership is like, one of the things I think is important about leadership. And when I look at leadership, I don't mean people who are in charge of people. I mean, I'm a leader to my clients, to my friends, to my partner. Like, part of that for me, we talked about integrity, I'm sure it's at the start of the school or before the school, but like, for me, it's like making everybody feel important. And it's amazing how many leaders fuck that up.
Yeah, but and here's the big thing out of that we've spoken about. It's like, you live within yourself, you live true to your values, and you live true to who you genuinely want to be. It's like, you live within integrity. That's, to me, the example of that when we were going through the definition. It's like, you stick within that. It's like, I see you do that, I fuck with you 100%. It's like, you pick up the phone, you need shit, it's like, I got your back.
Yeah,
because that's you're embodying what I see as a man, as a good human, as someone who actually knows what they want to do and where they're going in life. It's like, I got your back 100%. It's like, more people just need to do that and put their hand up if they don't understand. If they don't know that, like, that's okay. But it's like, let's make the concerted effort to try and fix that. It's like, and then we would be better.
Yeah. And I think that also that links into, like, it's old school men mentality of, like, you do DIY, you don't look at the instructions. You get a new PlayStation game, you don't read the instructions, you just go and work it out. And I feel that obviously that's very superficial surface layer stuff, but I find often what sometimes allows men to be stuck in these situations is that men feel they shouldn't ask for help.
Yeah.
Women are more inclined to ask for help. And a lot of times, like, I know the times where I felt I've really struggled with stuff. It's not always been the worst moments of my life. Some of it's been really simple stuff. But it also is that at the moment, maybe it was a simple fix, but I was so involved in the stress of the situation that I couldn't see the forest through the trees. And sometimes just having that person from an objective position to go, hey, do you know, if you just go through there, there's light.
Yeah.
And everything changes. And I think if people don't ask for help, I generally am a believer if you ask good questions, you get good answers. And it's something. Moving over to Hong Kong, not to necessarily offend anyone from Hong Kong watch this, but like, there's not a culture of it here. And I see people struggle because they go, do you understand? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. And then I have absolutely no idea. And it's this saving face thing.
Yeah.
That I feel it really limits how quickly people can get out of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% right.
So, so this has been unreal. We've gone through so much in a very, relatively short episode. Yeah. So like, just to sort of like wrap this up and close up, it's like, if there was a bit of advice, whether it's from being a man or whatever else, that you would give yourself at, let's say 17, 18, because that's when you start being a paramedic. Is there anything you'd change? Is there any advice you'd give yourself? Or is it very much everything here happened and it's led me to who I am?
Yeah, like I hate these statements because at the same time I wouldn't be where I am because of that. But something I wish I learned faster is how you do one thing is how you do everything. And like if I just stuck more towards that statement or embodied that statement faster, I think I would probably be in the position that I am now faster or even better. Yeah. I think that statement is just too true in every aspect. It's like, it's a difficult statement to wrap your head around, but it's simple. It's how you do everything is how you do, or how you do one thing is how you do everything. Yeah. It's like it's acting within integrity every single time.
I always remember that. The time I always remind myself of the statements, nearly every day right now, because I'm 6 weeks out from a photo shoot, I'm dieting hard, is that every time I got like 45 minutes of cardio right now, I get to about 41 and I go, 4 minutes would make no difference to my results. And every time then I remind myself, if I skip this here, if I skip like checking something on a post, if I skip something else like this, what else am I willing to take shortcuts on? Yep. And I think that's a really important lesson.
Yeah.
So like, if you had to give advice to, we can make this your future son, if you do have a son, or just a young man looking for advice to being a man in a world that's ever increasingly harder for men, what bit of advice would you give them?
Find a role model and learn as much as you can from them. Someone who you genuinely believe is a true man, who acts with integrity, who looks after women, who looks after their community, really gives back around that perspective, and truly embodies what I genuinely believe a man should be. It's like, find that person and use that person as your role model. That's the advice that I would give.
And lastly, like, just because it just reminded me when you were saying that, you mentioned a lot about what you feel a man should be. Now, other than integrity, what are the characteristics? Obviously, not bringing a hand to a woman and a child. What are the characteristics do you feel a man should have?
So integrity is the big one. Obviously, it's like honesty. It's the work ethic. To me, it's work ethic. It's like you work hard, and like when it gets tough, it's like Seth Feroshi says this every single time. Like, I just love it. He's fucking hilarious. If you don't listen to him, you got to listen to him. Yeah. He's short. Like, he says it's like, you don't have problems, you just have more work to do.
Love
it's
that.
It's perfect. That's exactly what it is. It's like, shit is tough, but it's like, just work harder. It's like, nobody cares. Work harder.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. So, if anyone wants to find out more about you, how can people find you?
Most appropriate means is probably through Instagram. So that's Coach James Mac. Shoot me a DM. I'm pretty good in terms of that. You can also shoot me an email at james@performanceprogramming.net. I'm pretty good at replying to those. Other than that, I'm nowhere else. That's pretty much where I unfortunately live. If anyone listens to this in Gold Coast, wants to hit up a training session, anything along those lines, I'm always down for just meeting new people and having conversations. If there's any men out there who just want to talk shit, get things off their mind, like want to have conversations that are stimulating from that perspective, please reach out. Like, I'm more than happy to have these conversations. Like, I think more men need to have these conversations, and I'm more than happy to kind of give my voice and opinion on this whole matter to anyone who wants to reach out and actually generally wants to have this conversation. Like, I'll make any and every time within my week to have these conversations with you.
Yeah, that's really, really admirable of you. And I think, it's probably well worth. I know I did this a couple of weeks ago with Jordan, but plug in Prescript. What is your role within that right now? And like,
so
where people do.
Yeah. So in terms of Prescript right now, like, I'm contracted to them. I teach one of their labs a week. So it's like one of the interactive labs that we have for our PSL 1, 2, skill acquisition courses. I am currently, well, we finished, but we're currently putting the final touches on our program design course. Myself and James Thayer will be presenting that next year.
That'd be cool.
So that's going to be really cool. I'm super excited about that. Like, we've put a lot of work into that, and that's going to be a very much like a coach's programming design course. It's like coaching coaches. So it's like what we generally think is applicable to coaches, and not just kind of like the sets and reps. So it's a different tweak on program design from that perspective. So it's going to be really interesting. And then I just, kind of live and die and bleed Prescript. Like that's kind of what we do as best as we can.
Well, thank you very much. This has been an absolutely great, like just over an hour chat. And thank you so much for coming on.
No, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Anytime.